19 years ago, I moved to Japan. And I started working in the anime field, doing music, composing music, and singing with various animes. And the first big one that I was involved with was called Cowboy Bebop, back in 2001. So if you go back, it's kind of, I guess now it's considered kind of classic anime. I started off in the Japanese music scene, which is an unusual situation for me, being that in the Japanese music scene in the late 90s. But I ended up there, and Yoko Kanno, I was singing for another Japanese band called Captain Funk at that time, doing breakbeat music, electronic music, and I was also, ever been at Pizzicato 5? Pizzicato 5, the Shibuya Kei kind of bands. At that time, there's this big Shibuya Kei kind of movement, rock bands in Japan that were singing in English. So they're looking for English singers. So I started fronting a few of the bands, and then Yoko Kanno found me through Victor Entertainment. And then she sort of mentored me and brought me into the anime scene. And I started singing and writing songs with her, and I continued for about 4 or 5 years. And then I still tour with her. It's called Yoko Kanno sequence. What's that? Yeah, it's been good. I didn't realize how, I didn't even realize how popular it was in the States until about 4 or 5 years ago when I started coming here. And then I realized how popular it was internationally. I've been in a bubble in Japan for the past 18 years. And I'd leave once a year to go on vacation, but I stayed mainly in Japan. And I didn't realize how big anime and Japanese music and games had gotten in the rest of the world. In Japan, you really don't see it, because you're so into that small bubble that's in Japan. It's 180 million people squashed on this tiny little island, basically, and people don't really know much. It's quite true. They know what they get from the media, but people don't really know what's going on in the rest of the world. So when you show up there, it's kind of shocking. When I went and started living there 18, almost 19 years ago, it was still very, very strange to see a foreigner on the streets. People didn't really know what to make of you. They couldn't tell where you were from. They didn't understand what was going on. Everybody was an American. Absolutely everybody was an American, unless you proved otherwise. You're an American. And kids would point at you on the streets, and people would just stop what they were doing and just want to stare at you for a while. And it's different now. 20 years later, it's different. Japan is becoming more and more global, but people are still very, very insulated in Japan. Working and living there is a very, very unique and unusual experience. And since then, I've traveled a lot and lived in other countries. And it's amazing how a developed nation like Japan can still not understand what's going on in the rest of the world, and how really, really insulated they are. So if you go there to work, it's really, really essential to understand how they think in Japan. And it's such a dramatically and opposite way of thinking from being American or Canadian or European. So I think I'll just leave you with that, and I'll see if you have any questions. Tell me what you want to know about Japan.
I've heard that Japan is rather strict with their visas, and it's hard enough to get in the first place, but they also have cases like sort of they call you on an almost yearly basis to sort of like re-examine your visa. And I was wondering, is there any actual truth to that? And so what's that all about?
Japan is not as strict as America, actually, in terms of getting a visa to live. Getting a green card in America is a much more challenging process. Believe me, I'm married to an American, I had to go through all that stuff. It's way more challenging here than it is in Japan. In Japan, if you can justify why you're there, that's all they want to know. Are you making enough money? 250,000 yen, which is equivalent to about $2,500 US, is sort of a minimum requirement that you need to have in order to stay in the country. So if some company says they'll pay you 250,000 yen and they'll show a statement, you can generally get a visa depending on what you're doing. The reason they have yearly visas, and they have 3-year visas, and then they have 10-year visas. A yearly visa sometimes can be like a working holiday visa. Can you guys hear me okay?
They might have.
Okay.
Speak louder.
A working holiday visa is something that Canadians get. Where you go if you're under 25 years old, and you're all under 25, right? If you're under 25 in Canada, you get a working holiday visa. You can stay for a year, work, without having to go through all the different processes. Otherwise, there's student visas you can get, which are 1 year, you have to renew them every single year for a student visa. A working visa nowadays is 3 years. A working visa is a little more tricky to get. You should get it before you go to Japan. Because if you get it when you're in Japan, you have to leave the country and come back in order to get the working visa. Once you get the working visa, you have to submit your income tax returns for every 3 years to prove that you've been making a certain amount of money. So the Japanese government doesn't deem that you're dependent on the Japanese government. And that's what they don't want to see. They don't want to see foreigners who are broke in the country. They don't want to see us dependent on their welfare system. They don't want to see any of that happen. And it's happening already. Because a lot of foreigners have gone there, and there are illegals coming into the country now. And there are people who are just there and getting, faking their visas just so they can stay in the country for various reasons. They have a girlfriend or boyfriend. So they are clamping down on everything, but the long and short of it is, if you can justify why you're there, and you can show that you're making enough money, then they're going to basically will leave you alone. And if you've got an American passport, a Canadian passport, or EU passport, you're in pretty good condition. You generally will get the visa. If you do the paperwork properly, there's going to be no reason to deny it.
I know that over there, the sign usually in Japanese, would you say it would be easier to learn the language before, at least learn something before going over there?
Yeah.
To understand the mentality.
Right.
Otherwise you lost.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I mean, everything is still, it doesn't really, nothing is sort of has any continuity in Japan. Everything, if you remember, everything there is a big contradiction. People study English up until grade 12, but they can't string together a simple sentence, right? Even the immigration officer, when you come to the airport, can't speak English. Yet he's dealing with people who don't speak Japanese all day long. All the signs are, the train signs are in English and Japanese, but don't believe the signs because they're not always correct. They usually are, but not always. And there's a lot of contradiction in everything that goes on. And learning some Japanese before you go there helps a lot. It definitely helps you a lot, but it doesn't guarantee you much because the Japanese that you'll learn here in school doesn't really work there in reality. It does not work, believe me. I went to Japanese school full time for 2 years when I first got there, and I lived there for 18 years, for half my life. And it took me, a good 4 years before I could communicate with people where they weren't trying to come back at me with English all the time. Even though I was speaking Japanese, they tried to speak to me in English, or it'd be a broken back and forth, half English, half Japanese kind of mess. So until you've got that confidence and the control of the kind of casual Japanese, because what you learn in school is this formal Japanese. And formal Japanese, if you don't speak it right, it just sounds strange to everybody. It just sounds way too formal. It doesn't sound like you're having a conversation. It sounds like you're reciting from a book or something. And that's the impression they get. You don't know what you're talking about. So immediately they'll switch to English and try and speak to you in English, and it'll just become really messy. So I would say learn as much as you can, but get into school there and start learning from everyday experiences in Japan. And don't hang out with other foreigners. That's the biggest mistake everybody makes. There's this gaijin ghetto in Japan where foreigners live there for 20 years and never speak a word of Japanese. They stay in their own circles. And that's kind of suicide if you're going to learn Japanese. You won't do it if you're stuck with other foreigners. You drink with them, you hang out with them, you work with them. You're not going to get anywhere, I can guarantee you that, because you'll never get immersed in the culture. My music clients there are Japanese production companies, labels, and publishers, and generally nobody speaks English. We do everything in Japanese. I'm forced every day, even now, I'm on the phone, I'm at 2 o'clock in the morning here, I'm on the phone with my management company in Japan, and I'm Skyping with them. You have to stay, I think you have to stay immersed in it to get anywhere.
My quick comment is that learning the Japanese alphabet is useful.
Romaji, or katakana and hiragana is very, very useful. It makes a big difference.
It makes a big difference,
Yeah.
Especially for the casual traveler.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's two different ways in Japan of reading and writing. There's three. Hiragana, katakana, and kanji. So kanji is symbolic, right? Symbols, but hiragana, katakana are phonetic, and that's something that's been developed over the years. It's not really part of them. It's something that the Japanese artificially created for a lot of reasons to be able to communicate better with each other. Because kanji is very complicated and it's difficult for people to learn kanji to be able to read and write properly. And it's originally from China. It's not Japanese. So there was no written Japanese language when the Chinese came over.
That's kind of like the elementary school. We start with kanji and and then we go to
You start with there.
yes. Yeah, that's what I was. Sorry. My question is, I have a lot of questions. I want to start from the beginning. It's like going to Japan. What was the things you were expecting and the things that turned out to be different, or what you expected?
I expected everybody to be able to speak English more than they could, and it's shocking. It's really shocking because, like I said, from the very beginning, the customs and immigration officers don't speak English. Like that seems absolutely ridiculous to me 20 years later. They still haven't been able to speak English. Yet Japan has a huge foreign population, and they're dealing with people every single day. So the one thing that to me is that you're going to have to adjust to them. They're not going to adjust to you. And that's one thing that a lot of foreigners have a hard time getting their heads around. We expect them they'll accommodate you, but they're not going to adjust to you. You have to adjust to that situation. Get used to paying 3 months rent up front and a 2-month rent gift to your landlord. My first, they call it deposit. Shikiken reikin. And shikiken reikin technically means it is a deposit and then a kind of gift to the landlord, which can be up to 5 months rent in advance, and only 2 or 3 of them will come back to you.
I have read some stuff that sometimes the environment can also be a little harsher to people who come there for the first time. Like, for example, the feel of the air or the smells, or it's hard to breathe. What was it like? What were you feeling most of this?
I had the asthma when I first got there, and I had a real problem with that. So if you're asthmatic, I mean, you got to actually watch it if you're in Tokyo, because Tokyo is for a city that big, it's really clean, but it is polluted. And the water, I mean, I would never drink the tap water in Tokyo. Personally, I never drank it in all the years. I started showering with the tap water without using a kind of filter, and I actually started using hair. Yeah, now the tap water's become better. That was about 10 years ago. It was like the tap water was in really bad condition. It's much better now, but keep in mind they've just had a major earthquake and nuclear reactor meltdown. So the radiation levels in Tokyo, I'm not discouraging you, but I haven't been back in about 10 months. I'm kind of waiting to hear how they're cleaning things up there. So it's something to consider if you're going to go with young kids. I would say wait until we figure out what they figure out what they're going to do with this situation. It's still pretty. It's dicey. It is dicey. I'm constantly back and forth on the phone and Skyping with my friends and colleagues there. It is still it's a dicey situation right now, but it's still a wonderful country. So I really encourage you to go there. So,
like I said, I have many questions. When you got there, the money transactions, like for example, like the value of the yen, it's confusing because the stock market goes up and down. Was that confusing to you, like knowing exactly the prices and then coming into America again and then seeing the prices here? Was that confusing, especially like when they would say 3,000 yen, but that's really like $30?
$30. Kind of round it off. 2,000 yen, $20. 1,000 yen is like $10. But 1,000 yen doesn't buy you much in Tokyo. It does not buy you much. You can go into a bar and have a beer for 1,000 yen. Or a cup of coffee can cost you $5 to $6 in some places. Right, but $3 for a cup of coffee is pretty normal. So if you look at it that way, if you go into just a regular Starbucks, it's $3 for a cup of coffee. It's pretty standard, and that's not that price. That's reasonable.
It's about what this year.
Is it about $3 here? Yeah. Okay. And Starbucks.
It's comparable. 30 years ago, it was still $4 per cup of coffee. So considering inflation, now it's comparable.
Yeah. No. I mean, I guess if you convert to Japanese yen, it's actually more because the yen is stronger than the American dollar. So it's probably it's probably more like $4 actually if you convert over to Japanese yen, something like that. That's all.
Is it expensive living in the city more than the rural area?
Absolutely. You're gonna pay. My apartment in Tokyo was a one bedroom. We call it a one LDK, one bedroom, living room, dining room, kitchen. We say one LDK. It was probably 16, 24 mats, something like that. So it was probably about 3/4 the size of this room, and I paid about $1,500 for it. It was less than. That's probably about a third, 2/3 of this room. No, 2/3 of this room. And that was a good deal. And that was $1,500 a month, plus all your utilities and everything, and then your parking space, which is $350 a month parking. If you want to, yeah, parking can cost you about $300 a month.
What was the property space for?
Pardon me?
You said the property space was
Parking space.
parking space.
Yeah.
About 300.
About 300. If you decide to drive, which I wouldn't advise, I would say don't get a car. I switched to a motorcycle because it just became ridiculous. With a car, you couldn't get anywhere. It's too expensive.
It gets more expensive.
It does. It's a very expensive city, and because there's so many things that add up. You know, I would say stay in a dormitory kind of thing, like a foreign guest house thing.
Well, is that just respective to Tokyo, or is that respective to Japan as a whole?
It's Tokyo. I mean, you're gonna have the same problem in Osaka, in Tokyo, but you know, Tokyo includes Yokohama, Kawasaki, and all those places in the rural areas. You have to go pretty far out of Tokyo for those prices to dramatically come down. And if you're in rural Japan, I'm not exactly sure what you want to do in rural Japan. I mean, unless you're just gonna like tour around or teach English or something. There's really not much to do in rural Japan. You know, it could be very isolated actually.
Using the trains there, is it really as crowded as I've seen and heard?
Yes.
That they pack you in like sardines?
Yeah, rush hour in Tokyo is unreal. It's not even human. And you will be seriously squashed up against people. You'll have somebody's umbrella on your face. You know, you'll literally be feeling people's sweat trickle off their faces on yours.
Yeah.
You're so close together. You won't believe it. And I might think I'm exaggerating, but when you go there, you get onto a rush hour train, you won't believe it, because that guy will come and he'll push you all onto that train. They'll make sure your arms aren't hanging out. They'll push you all and squeeze you into that train. But you can avoid it. It's only for about 4 or 5 hours out of the day where it's like that. The rest of the time, it's it's quiet on the train. So, right.
After 9-ish, 10-ish, right?
It's like rush hours in the morning. So from about 8 o'clock in the morning till about 9:30, it's going to be packed. And then from about 4 or 5 till about 6 or 7, it's going to be packed. And then again, the last train, because the trains end generally about 12:30 at night, or 12:45, and then everybody's running for the last train. And there's a lot of people puking on Friday and Saturday nights as well. And keep that in mind. There's a lot of people barfing all over the place. I couldn't believe it either. But yeah. Sorry.
How's the food scene there?
Food?
Yeah.
Food's great. There's nothing to complain about that. You can get cheap food. You can go to stand-up like soba, tachi-ibi, soba places. There's inexpensive places to go and eat. So the kaiten sushi, or the sushi that goes around on a conveyor belt, you go to Shibuya, you can get it for $1 a plate roughly, which is cheaper than here.
Yeah.
Cheaper than here. I was surprised here it's more expensive, but you can go to like a teisho food, which is a Japanese set meal, rice, miso soup, pickles, and fish. You get it for like $8 or something like that, and no tipping. This is a great thing. So when I pick me up in America, I get a tip everywhere I go.
Yes.
I was like, where's the discount if you're tipping everybody? Sorry.
Again, just to add to that, remember it is Japanese taste you're talking about in terms of the food, not the American tastes.
Yeah.
Which I'm satisfied with, but I know that a lot of people I've gone on tour with, won't go anywhere near it as Americans because they just don't know, or they're not used to that particular cuisine.
No, it's true. It's true. I mean, if you like Japanese food, and I'm sure that's probably one of the reasons you're going to Japan, because you enjoy the cuisine and the culture. You can get really good food for a reasonable price. You can live on a budget. You can if you do it right. So, I'm sorry.
For the public, going around the public, what is some of the things you most likely see for people? Like, for example, if you see like students on the street, you see them all like in uniforms, like these teens, or do you see them mostly doing some of their activities? Like, what is the activities of like the people around that you go on the street with?
Mainly shopping and hanging out. You know, it's a consumerist society, and that's really the nature of the Japanese society. People consume. They go to restaurants, they go to bars, they go to cafes, they go shopping. It's alive, and it's always alive, and 24/7. It's something's happening there. Here you go home. There you go out. You don't invite people to your home in Japan. You will almost never get an invitation to a home there. You'll get invited to go out.
You have no space.
There's no space, yeah. There's no space. I'm sorry.
What's the job market like in Japan for Americans?
Depending on what you want to do. I mean, this is post-earthquake. There's definitely been a lot of changes. I would have said 2 years ago, I would have said fantastic, because even though Japan has a huge deficit right now with China, so does America, the average savings of a 30-year-old Japanese man is close to $50,000 and no debt. The average Japanese man who's 30 is living at home with his mom and dad, has 50 grand in the bank, doesn't have any credit card debts, and he hasn't bought a home, he's probably not even married yet. So they have personal savings, which offsets the national debt, which means they keep spending money and driving the economy. But that doesn't mean companies are going to hire you, because right now the Japanese are struggling to find jobs. But there's opportunity still for Americans now because of the earthquake. This is kind of a weird catch-22. Because of the earthquake, a huge part of the foreign population has left, mainly those with children, because they're worried about the radiation. But if you're an adult, you're pretty close to dying anyway, so there you go. Go enjoy yourself. Sorry.
What kind of credential you need to teach English in?
Generally, you need at least a bachelor's degree. Generally, a BA. Most companies will not hire you without a BA. To get a visa, you need to have a BA. So if you don't have a BA, you're probably going to be out of luck, unless you get on some kind of program from here. The JET program will hire you with a TEFL qualification or something like that. But generally, they want a BA to qualify for a visa. That's truly good. So,
2 questions. A BA in anything,
yeah.
and the other question is, you speak of these tiny little apartments.
Yeah.
What is the bathing and plumbing arrangement in an apartment, in a personal apartment that small?
You know, sorry, your first question was
Is there a BA in anything?
Yeah, a BA in anything. Basically, a BA in anything. You know, an undergrad degree in anything could likely get you an English teaching job. That's for sure. You know, because they just need teachers, especially in rural areas. That's why you end up in a rural area if you're teaching English. Bathing situation in Japan is not bad. If you stay in what's called gaijin house or a guest house, you can get a room probably in central Tokyo for maybe about 70,000 yen, $700 a month. And then you probably will end up sharing the shower and the toilet with other people in central Tokyo. The further away from the core of Tokyo you get, the cheaper it's going to get, and you can get your own apartment for maybe as cheap as $700. You might be able to get like a 6 tatami mat, which is like the size of this little corner, just right here. Something like that with a little unit, shower, and bath. But, you know, I like going to what's called sento, which is the public baths. And I go to them regularly when I'm in Tokyo because they're great. It's just this big bathhouse. They're on every corner. They're all over the place. And onsen hot springs are everywhere. So I spend a lot of time in Japan with other naked guys or hanging out. So it's just like this, you know, the onsen thing is big in Japan. It's like you meet your friends, let's go to the onsen, you go to the hot spring together. And then it's just, you know, normal kind of thing. So, I'm sorry.
I've got 3 questions.
It's good.
I've got 3 questions. We're talking about I'm still on the bathhouse as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's it's one more like a shared bathhouse.
It's a sento.
How does that work out exactly? I mean, you can't. There's obviously certain rules.
Yeah.
So what are that? I mean, when you stay on one side of the bathhouse or when you go on the other,
Yeah.
you have to shower first in separate showers before you go into the actual baths. So that when you're clean before you actually go in.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, a lot of sentos are very, very sensitive, and because of that, they actually have English signs on a lot of the walls because foreigners have made some pretty awful mistakes, you know, there. So, but you do bathe before you get in the sento, and the men and women are separated. You can go to what's called konyoku, which is like a mixed, you know, onsens. They're out in the countryside. But you bathe before you get in. You take your shoes off. You never wear your shoes in there. You bathe thoroughly before you get into the hot baths. And yeah, and it's like $5, $6 to go to the hot bath house. The onsen, which is natural spring water, is much more expensive. That's like going to Calistoga or something like that. So, let's continue. What about somebody? No? Okay. Yes, go.
What would you exactly go from like here to Japan? Like you obviously do need a BA. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's a bachelor.
Yeah.
Bachelor's degree.
Yeah, Bachelor of Arts. Yeah. Or
Obviously,
bachelor's degree actually.
need the visa. What exactly is the details of how much money you need to go, and then also you obviously need to find some kind of connections to have a job before you go. That way you have security.
You know, you can go to Jobs in Japan, which is a job board in Japan, and Gaijin Pot as well, and go to the Metropolis magazine. These are online places, and they actually have job listings and postings for different jobs in Japan. I'd suggest getting the job before you can go to Japan if you can. It will save you a lot of hassles if you get the job visa before you go. Otherwise, like I said, you show up in Japan, you interview the company, they like you, you don't have to leave the country and go back again. So a lot of people fly over to Korea, which is like a cheap flight, and they come back after the weekend or something like that, get the visa stamped in Korea, re-enter the country. But it's not the ideal way of doing things, and you can get denied. You can get stopped if they just don't like the way you are, the way you handle yourself. You can stop and just say that's it, they don't want you, and then you lose the job. So.
Sorry, how much money do you think they will suggest going into Japan on even the plane flight and then also money, so you have a safety net when you go to Japan to have a job or get a job, apartments.
Yeah, I'd give yourself 3 months to get set up, at minimum 3 months. I mean, a lot of my friends who come over the years, I've just told them, have 3 months. Find out where you're going to live. If you're going to live in a cheap area outside of Tokyo, if your rent is $80,000 or $800 a month, then you have to factor in that your cost is going to be another $700 a month just to live and transportation. You got to take the train everywhere. Nothing is free. Put it that way. Nothing is free. Everything costs. Going to some parks will cost you entrance fee. So it's not a cheap place to be. So I would say, you could get by on 3 months. In 3 months, you could get by on maybe, if you really did it cheap, maybe $1,200 to $1,500 a month. So I would say come there, at least have $3,000 minimum. Give yourself 2 months to find a job and get settled.
I might add to that the healthcare system is a little different over there. It's bring cash to the hospitals and stuff. So
Yeah.
it might be advisable to have some sort of I don't know, insurance, but or at least some cash reserves for that as well. So basically, you don't want to go over there and get sick.
Yeah.
I guess I'm guessing that the medical is comparable, but it's just that you're paying the money up front, as opposed to insurance.
You're paying money up front, and believe me, you don't want to go to the Japanese hospital. You do not want to go. The image we have is a very modern, developed country, but the hospitals are terrible.
Yeah.
They're really, really awful in Japan. They don't have paramedics. If you get hit by a car on the street, some two guys who are retired are probably going to pick you up in the ambulance. And that's what happened to me. I got into a motorcycle accident, and I broke my leg, and no paramedic showed up. 2 guys in a truck showed up, and they got an ambulance and put me in the back, and that's it. So, yeah, sorry.
I think when you said that nothing is free, I think I heard that you have to pay for the public television there too.
You do.
And and this is true for other countries, including the UK and.
Yeah. The NHK guy, the PBS guy will literally, as soon as you have an address, he'll come knocking on your door asking you for money, demanding money from you. And it's about $50 a month, and he'll come back over and over again with a bill and try and squeeze that out of you. Like, I've literally had to jump over the fence and run from it. Because you don't have to pay it, well you do, but you don't. And everybody tries to avoid it. So when you first get to Japan, you're like, this guy's charging me this much money, for 6 months, this bill comes. And, me and my friends were living in a, kind of mansion house at that time, and so, we just didn't want to pay these ridiculous bills. They would come in. So, yeah, you get charged for it. That's what I mean. There's lots of things you can get charged with. So I wouldn't recommend your own place. I'd say stay in a guest house as long as you can. It's all inclusive. Everything's inclusive, and you have fewer hassles with everything. Sorry.
What should you try to learn about the culture before you go over there?
My experience is learn what not to say. Don't put your foot in it with people, because if they won't show you that they dislike you, they just won't deal with you ever again. And a lot of foreigners get in people's faces in Japan, which is a big mistake. And because they're very patient and they're very nice people. And a lot of foreigners go too far with it and take advantage of it. And a lot of foreigners can sometimes get in people's faces about stuff because they're very passive. So I would say just learn to tone things down and be very polite, and learn what not to say to people. Don't be too direct and demanding, because that's one thing in Japan. If you're direct and demanding, I'm going to guarantee you people will start to dislike you, and they will. Here it's like sometimes you have to be demanding to get what you want. It doesn't really work that way there. It's more being polite, being a real gentleman. Will get you much further in Japan than being belligerent with people. And that's really, honestly, half my life now, I'm guaranteeing you that situation. Don't believe people.
Have you ever been to any of conventions over there, any time in public or thing?
I haven't gone to the anime conventions. It's something that's more of a phenomena here.
I'm just asking you in general, any convention.
In North America?
In
No.
Japan.
In Japan, no. I haven't been to the anime conventions there. I mean, I've been at the other end of it, writing music and performing. So I generally don't go to the conventions. I'm either as a performer working with the companies like Gonzo or Bandai, or people that I work with. So no, I don't have experience.
If you were going to teach English in Japan, you have a BA, how much Japanese do you need to know in order to be doing this?
You can get away with nothing. Believe me, most people come over there and can't speak any Japanese. I'd say 90% of people. And those who do can't speak Japanese well enough to get anywhere. So it's like they come over with basic Japanese, which is helpful for the students. But if you teach, for example, like at Berlitz, they don't want you to speak any English with the students, or Japanese rather than students. Schools want you to speak English because that's what they're there to learn. So there's methods. I know because some of my friends work at Berlitz and other places. You generally have to speak English with them and teach them how to learn English. So Japanese is redundant.
You talked about working on kind of the development side of things. I'm not sure what your experience is in the States, but is the Japanese corporate culture or business culture drastically different or unique in that way?
In my opinion, yeah. I mean, it's a different way. You mean in what kind of corporate culture?
I suppose just like whether it's going to be niceties or bureaucracy or kind of who you know or what you know or moving up in the chain or things like that.
Well, it's definitely a very layered bureaucracy in Japan, and it's tough to get things done. There's a lot of paper. Everything involves a lot of paperwork. Everything is a lot of paperwork. And it is a corporate culture. There's very little government involvement with a lot of things. It's mainly very corporate everywhere you go. If that answers your question. Yeah.
Two things. First one is that about the guys come to your doors and
Yeah.
How do you know though that you're not being scammed? I mean, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of honest people, but I'm pretty sure there might be a small amount of scammers who might try to swindle people out of like money, like pretend that they're something else. That's one. And two, I was wondering how qualifications you need to be involved in the animation.
First question, I would say your chances of you being swindled by a Japanese are almost nothing, because A, they're not going to go after a foreigner trying to swindle you. You're the last person on the target, because they don't consider us to be fluent. They're going to go after, well, the Japanese who they can communicate with and swindle. So they call them sagishi, or scams in Japan, are generally, Yakuza or lower levels of Yakuza scamming other Japanese. We mean nothing to them. They're not going to come over to us in these cheap, rare places and try and scam us. So if anything, they're going to be helping you out. So I would not be worried about being scammed in Japan. People are generally very helpful, and they're just not going to get scammed. It's just not. It's not one of those things. You might get ripped off on the rent deposits because they'll ask you to put a big deposit down, they won't give it back to you. That's what we get ripped off on. So, sorry.
What's the crime rate like?
Very, very low. Japan is extremely safe. They're more scared of you than anything else. They're scared of you because they consider us to be more of a dangerous element than anything else. So if you look at it that way, we're looked at as a dangerous element. They'll have, and it is racist. It is a racist country. They're very xenophobic. On the surface, they're friendly, but it is really, really is a racist, xenophobic country. That's very true. There's no way around it. No one. I mean, you can ask anybody. That's just the way it is. I mean, they'll have posters up in the laundromat where you're clearly a foreigner saying, "Don't steal laundry." You know, there'll be stuff like that. You'll see it. You'll see it around. And that's okay. That's just the way it is. You know, they don't see it that way. You know, but it's safe though. It's extremely safe. I've never had any problems. I've lost money and got it back. The enemy. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It depends what you're doing in the anime world. I'm just doing strictly music in the anime world and some voiceover stuff. So I'm not sure what field you're trying to get into, but I mean, there's a lot of opportunities. There are opportunities. There's agencies in Japan that have voice, and you can just go online and find them. There's a list of agencies, voiceover agencies.
There's a site, guys, that has a whole list. There's